All right, I'm now joined by our insider, Brian Windhorst, and former champ with the Boston Celtics, Kendrick Perkins. So let's start with you, Perk. What was your reaction to all of this news as it was breaking today?
Well, it wasn't surprising to me about Danny Ainge. I talked to Danny Ainge. We have a very close relationship, and I talk to him at least 2 times a week. And it's not about basketball. Every time he calls me, he keeps me on the phone for an hour and a half, 2 hours, talking about life, talking about his grandchildren, talking about his children, how he loved being around his family. And over the last 2 years, as we started having those conversations more frequently, I started realizing, I said, Danny is going to retire soon, or he's going to walk away. You could just tell he was leaning in that direction. Now, as far as Brad Stevens, far as taking over the front office job and taking over Danny role, that was surprising to me. I wasn't surprised that he stepped down as a head coach, because I could, as covering the Boston games late at night, working for the Boston network, you started to see that it just wasn't a connection there with him and his stars. The camaraderie wasn't there. And I pointed that out a few times. So Brad moving up to the front office job, I think is great for the organization. Him finding another coach, which I think it should be Sam Cassell, just my humble opinion, a guy that won the championship there with the Celtics. I like that move. So now it's just in Brad's hand, but he have to be very, very careful, Rachel, on who he chooses as the coach, because we all know that Boston fan base is real harsh on the decision-making for us bringing someone in to lead the charge.
I'm going to be a little coarse here because I just want to get straight to the point, because I know that Danny had a great career. The last 4 years, the Celtics have underperformed out of their front offi's. Out of everything that they've done to set themselves up.
Be a little careful. They've been in the Eastern Conference Finals 3 of the last 4 years prior to this year.
That's what I'm saying. I don't. You're right. I'm going to be a little coarse, but they fell behind. They've fallen. They had a great opportunity to build a juggernaut with this team, and they just didn't do it. And they've fallen behind the at least 3 teams in the East: Brooklyn, Milwaukee, and Philadelphia. And would you look at them going forward? All of these draft picks that they could have traded for stars, they didn't. And so, I don't know if today is not the day to have an introspection about that. The other thing I would say is that Brad Stevens, I'd like to know the answer to the question, why is Brad Stevens better for the Boston Celtics as the team president than the head coach? And that question was asked in this press conference several times to ownership, to Brad, and there wasn't a good answer that was given. Maybe there's a truth that they don't want to say. This was a terrible season for the Celtics, very much of a disappointment. Not all of it their fault. They paid a tax because they went deep into the bubble last year and then had to come back. All of those teams, we're looking at the Lakers struggling, the Heat are gone, the Nuggets are scrapping to get out of the first round. I understand that. But it's been the Celtics have underachieved a little bit. The good news is they do have 2 young stars on their roster, and so whoever gets this coaching job is going to have a great opportunity. And the person I would say to keep an eye out for is Chauncey Billups. Kevin Arnovitz of ESPN.com just came out with his annual list, which is read so closely across the NBA of the next great coaches. He's predicted some of the great young coaches have come through. Number 1 person on his list that came out today, Chauncey Billups, former Celtic. Keep an eye on that one.
I love the idea of Chauncey. I love the idea of Sam Cassell. I hope that they both get serious consideration. It is interesting. You talk about the pressure of having that Boston Celtics job. Just the way you're talking about it right now, Brian, and you're not wrong at all that this was not a good season in terms of what the Boston Celtics expectations are, because they were scrapping just in the play-in to get into the playoffs. But again, when you look at a team that made the Eastern Conference Finals 3 of the previous 4 years. The Clippers have never made a Western Conference Finals in their history.
And Rachel...
And by the way, to Danny's point that I relayed in our conversation from the other day, they've got 2 All-Stars under the age of 25. They were still in the playoffs this year. And yet, you are 100% correct. A huge disappointment in Boston to have that kind of season, and with the outsets that Danny had set up for himself over those past couple years. It begs the question, Perk, what do you think the expectation is going to be with this team in an Eastern Conference where it's funny, I saw on the internet all morning, oh, the Brooklyn Nets broke the Boston Celtics. I don't think they broke